I was already standing on the front porch when they pulled up. Two cars, Dad's silver SUV and Darren's aging minivan, creaked into the driveway like a caravan arriving to claim its reward. My mother stepped out first, her face lit with expectation. Waving like this was some kind of joyous family occasion. Rachel followed behind, gently wrangling the twins out of their car seats while Darren stayed behind the wheel, checking his reflection in the mirror. Of course he did. "This isn't Oak Hill," Dad muttered the moment he looked around, his eyes narrowing at the quiet tree-lined street and the modest bungalow behind me. "No," I said calmly, my hand already on the doorknob. "It's Selwood. This is my new home." There was a beat of silence, the kind that hangs just before the sky breaks. Then it started. "What the hell, Isabel?" Darren's voice cut through the air, sharp and loud enough to make a few neighbors peek through their windows. "Where are we supposed to live? This can't be it. How will we fit?" "You won't," I said, turning the key and opening the door. "Because this house isn't for you." Mom gasped behind him. Rachel froze in place. The kids, still half inside the minivan, looked at each other in confusion. Dad took a few slow steps forward, his voice lower but laced with quiet fury. "We made an offer on the Oak Hill house, in your name. The seller is expecting signatures this week." "I never agreed to that," I replied. "You let us believe." Mom's voice cracked, trembling with hurt or maybe performance. "You said you were considering it." I said I was looking at options, I corrected. "This is the one I chose. For myself." Darren stepped closer now, his face red. "So you're just abandoning your family? Leaving us to scramble with 3 kids and nowhere to go?" I looked at him, really looked at the man who had been handed every chance and still stood with his hand outstretched, waiting for more. "No," I said slowly. "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm just choosing not to be used." The door clicked shut behind me, muffling their voices, but not the echo of Darren's final shout before it closed. "How selfish can you be?" Inside, the quiet was immediate, and for the first time in decades, it didn't feel empty. It felt like mine. Growing up in Boulder, Colorado, our house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac with a view of the mountains. It was small, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, but it always felt heavier than it looked, like the walls carried a weight we weren't supposed to talk about. From the very beginning, there were 2 sets of rules in our home. One for Darren, one for me. When Darren broke curfew, it was because he was adventurous. "Boys need room to test limits," Dad would say with a chuckle. But when I came home 10 minutes late from a group project, the house lights were off and the deadbolt clicked shut just loud enough to sting. When I aced my science fair in 8th grade, I came home clutching my trophy like it meant something. Mom glanced at it, nodded absently, then went right back to talking about Darren's progress in algebra. He'd pulled AC that semester. It was treated like a miracle. "You're just naturally good at things, Isabel," she told me once, when I finally asked why it never felt like I mattered as much. "Darren needs more encouragement, more support." Support meant new hockey gear every season. It meant private driving lessons at 16 and unrestricted access to the car. I got the bus schedule taped to my mirror and a rusted bike with 2 gears that didn't work. At 18, Darren was gifted a used Subaru for graduation. I got a congratulatory card with a $50 Target gift card inside, and a list of chores for the weekend. But it wasn't just about gifts or grades. It was the way our parents looked at him, like they were always waiting for him to become something bigger, better, as if they saw potential blooming and saw me as already bloomed, and therefore less urgent. I worked through college, juggling 2 jobs and a course load that made my vision blur. Meanwhile, Darren floated through 3 different business programs before dropping out entirely. At one point, he launched a landscaping app, some awkward combination of Uber and lawn care. It burned through not only his college fund, but mine too. I only found out after I tried to transfer tuition for my final year. "It's temporary," Dad had said. Family helps family. The app shut down 6 months later. I remember standing in my tiny off-campus apartment, holding the disconnected call from financial aid, realizing I would have to take on another loan, and still be expected to visit home for Thanksgiving with a smile on my face. Even then, I didn't fully grasp what was happening. Not yet, but seeds were already planting that maybe love in our family had a condition. Darren first. After college, I packed everything I owned into the back of a borrowed hatchback and drove west until the map turned green and unfamiliar. Portland felt like a clean slate. The air smelled of pine and possibility. No one knew me as Darren's sister. I was just Isabel, finally. I started small, as most do. Entry-level design assistant at a boutique interiors firm. The kind of job where you fetch coffee, organize tile samples, and bite your tongue when a client calls you sweetheart. But I climbed quietly, steadily. Within 3 years, I was managing mid-tier projects. By 30, I had my own design team and a corner office with views of the Willamette. It didn't come without cost. While my peers bought handbags and weekend getaways, I set up spreadsheets. I skipped brunches, ignored flash sales, declined destination weddings. Every bonus went into savings. Every rental I chose was one I could live in without furniture upgrades. Because I wasn't just saving for a home, I was saving for freedom. Something with walls that were mine, floors I could choose, and windows that let in light instead of expectations. For 7 years, I lived frugally and intentionally. I worked late. I took freelance commissions on weekends. I passed up a dozen apartments I could have afforded because they would have delayed my goal by 6 months, a year, sometimes 2. Still, I never resented the sacrifice, because every time I transferred money into my home fund, it felt like reclaiming something that had been taken from me long ago. The power to choose. Back in Boulder, Darren married Rachel, an online ESL teacher who seemed nice enough but quiet. Within 18 months, they had twins. By the time they were 4, baby number 3 arrived, a daughter they named Lila. Darren jumped jobs like stepping stones that never led anywhere. Tech sales, automotive parts, a short stint in real estate. Always a reason it hadn't worked out. Always a plan for what would. When the economy dipped last year and layoffs rippled through the country, he was one of the first cut. Again, with no savings, no severance, and 3 kids under 6, he moved his family into our parents' house. Just until things stabilize, Mom said on a call. Things didn't stabilize. The check-ins became weekly guilt trips. Your brother's trying his best, Mom would sigh. But you know how expensive it is for a family of 5. I did. I also knew that it wasn't my job to fix it, especially now when I was finally ready to build something of my own. I had the down payment. I had the pre-approval. I had the design vision. No one could talk me out of this time. What I didn't know was how fast my dream was about to collide with their expectations. I flew home that October weekend with my heart brimming with quiet pride. 33, financially independent, and days away from house hunting in earnest. My plan was simple. Spend the weekend celebrating with my parents, maybe take a walk through our old neighborhood, and finally share the news. Mom insisted on cooking my favorite lemon rosemary chicken and roasted red potatoes. I arrived with a bottle of champagne in hand and an ache in my chest that only comes when you believe, however foolishly, that this time might be different. The front door opened into chaos. Toys littered the floor like landmines. The twins ran screaming through the hallway in circles, while Rachel sat on the couch looking like a ghost of herself, baby Lila clinging to her shoulder. Darren was nowhere in sight. He's just picking up the cake, Mom said brightly, hugging me with one arm while nudging a tricycle out of the doorway. Isn't it wonderful having a full house again? Dad gave me a quick side hug and disappeared almost immediately, grumbling about a work call, though he retired 2 years ago. Dinner was exactly what I'd expected and nothing like I'd hoped. The twins refused to sit still. Lila knocked over a glass of water. Darren showed up 40 minutes late, with a generic grocery store cake and an apology that barely touched the surface. The conversation revolved entirely around the kids, who said what, who colored on the walls, who finally learned to sleep through the night. I kept waiting for my moment, the one where I'd say, "I'm buying a home," and they'd cheer or at least smile. But it never came, because just as the cake was being sliced, Mom and Dad exchanged a look. I knew that look. I'd seen it before competitions Darren didn't deserve to enter, before vacations I wasn't invited on, before announcements that changed everything. For me, never for him. "Isabel," Mom said, folding her napkin like this was a board meeting, "we've been thinking a lot about your house search." Dad nodded, his tone clipped and rehearsed. "And we actually found a place. 5 bedrooms, 3 baths, finished basement. In Eastmoor. Still close enough to your office, but with good schools and a big yard." I blinked. 5 bedrooms. "We assumed you'd need space," Mom continued, undeterred. "Darren and Rachel can take the master. The twins can share. Lila gets her own room. You'd still have a guest room and an office upstairs." I stared at her, unsure if she was joking. She wasn't. Darren joined in, casual as if we'd discussed this 100 times. "You've got the down payment and the credit. I can contribute monthly once I land something stable. This way the kids have room to grow. And you," Rachel's voice was soft, "you'd have your own area in the finished attic. It's quiet, lots of light." I hadn't spoken a word. My pulse thundered. The champagne in my stomach turned to stone. "I've been saving for my own place," I said finally. "For me. I'm not looking for roommates." Dad's voice sharpened. "This isn't about roommates. This is about family. Darren has 3 children. He needs support. And what do I need?" I whispered, but no one answered. The silence that followed was familiar, and louder than anything they'd said all night. I barely slept that night. Back in the guest room, formerly Mom's sewing space, now a storage closet with an air mattress that deflated by 3 a.m. I stared at the ceiling, trying to breathe through the thudding of my own heartbeat. 5 bedrooms, a Victorian monstrosity, $850,000. They hadn't just made a suggestion, they'd made plans. I left before breakfast the next morning, citing a work call that didn't exist. My parents didn't press. Darren barely looked up from his phone. Rachel offered a tight smile from the kitchen while pouring cereal for the kids. It was only once I was back in Portland, curled into the familiar safety of my apartment, that the numbness began to fade and the clarity set in. This wasn't just one outrageous request. It was the culmination of a lifetime of expectations, a pattern that would never stop unless I stopped it. I picked up the phone and called Monica James. Monica had been my colleague's realtor and was known for her bluntness, impeccable taste, and zero tolerance for emotional nonsense. Exactly what I needed. Over coffee, she asked the right questions. 2 bedrooms minimum. Any natural light preferences? Need space for your work. Then, almost casually, she added, "This is just for you, right? No children or other dependents." I nodded. "Just me." "Perfect," she said, scribbling notes. "That gives us so many more options." We started touring that same week. Some houses smelled like old wood and heartbreak. Others were too big, too beige, too obviously designed for families with Labrador retrievers and minivans. And then on a quiet street in Selwood Moorland, she unlocked the door to a 1920s craftsman bungalow. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, original hardwood floors, a sunroom with south-facing windows. The kitchen had been updated, but the built-in shelves and vintage charm remained intact. The backyard had a single maple tree and just enough space for morning coffee or a small herb garden. I walked through slowly, touching the door frames, imagining my furniture in each room. When we stepped onto the back patio, Monica looked at me and said, "So?" "I want it," I whispered. "I don't need to see anything else." We submitted an offer slightly over asking, with a personal letter to the sellers about how this wasn't just a purchase, it was a reclamation. And 2 days later, it was mine. Legally mine. I didn't tell my family. Not yet. Instead, I let the texts from Mom pile up. Links to furniture for the boys' room, Darren's suggestions for backyard play equipment, Dad's questions about mortgage structures. I replied only when necessary, always with vague promises. Still weighing options. Need time to think. Let's talk after my deadline passes. The truth sat quietly in my chest, like a secret too sacred to share. I had signed the papers, set the closing date, scheduled the movers, and for the first time in my life, I was making a decision they couldn't undo. Closing happened on a Thursday. By Friday, the keys jingled in my palm like small symbols of rebellion. The house was empty, save for the mattress I had delivered and the suitcase I carried in, but it felt alive, like it had been waiting, just for me. I didn't post about it, didn't tell coworkers, didn't even tell Taylor, my best friend, until the next day when she dropped by with Thai takeout and froze in the doorway. Wait, this is yours. I nodded, suddenly unsure whether to laugh or cry. You bought it, she said, setting the food down. You really did it. Yes, I whispered. I really did. The following Monday, I sent one text. Come by Saturday at 2. I want to show you something. I kept it vague. Let them assume. It wasn't a lie, just not the story they were writing in their heads. At 1:55 p.m., I stood on the front steps of my Selwood bungalow in jeans and a linen blouse, trying to slow my breath. At 2 o'clock sharp, the same two cars from weeks earlier pulled into the driveway. Dad stepped out first, scanning the modest neighborhood with furrowed brows. This doesn't look like Oak Hill. It's not, I said. Mom's eyes darted to the house, then back at me. Where's the realtor? Didn't you say we were finalizing the paperwork today? I did, I said. Just not for the house, you think. Darren's door slammed. Wait, what is this? You said we were seeing the new place. You are, I said. This is it. This is my home. Silence. Heavy, stunned, insulting silence. Rachel's arms tightened around baby Lila. The twins, still buckled in, peered through the car windows. Mom blinked. But this house only has 2 bedrooms. Exactly, I said. Darren's voice climbed instantly. Is this some kind of joke? Where are we supposed to sleep? You're not, I said evenly, because this house isn't for you. It never was. Dad's face turned dark. We made an offer. We started the mortgage process using your name. Without my consent, I replied, which, by the way, is a legal issue. Mom stepped forward. You misled us. You said you were still deciding. I was trying to protect myself, I said, because every time I say no, you turn it into a guilt campaign. This was the only way I could make a decision without being bullied. How could you do this to us? Darren exploded. My kids were expecting a backyard, their own rooms. Then maybe you should buy them a house, I said sharply. With your money, on your credit. His face flushed. That's rich coming from the one who's always had it easy. Easy. My voice cracked, not with weakness, but restraint. I worked for every cent of this, while you burned through college funds, business loans, and grace. Rachel stepped in then, quietly but clearly. Kevin, Isabel's right. He whipped toward her. Don't start. She didn't back down. I looked at them all, their confusion, their rage, their disbelief, and I felt nothing but clarity. I didn't betray this family, I said, voice steady. I just stopped betraying myself. And with that, I turned, walked through the door, and closed it gently behind me. The world outside exploded into shouting, but inside, I had peace. For the next 3 weeks, I heard nothing. No calls, no texts, not even one of Mom's passive-aggressive forwarded articles about family unity or the importance of sacrifice. Just silence, and at first it gutted me. I wasn't sure what hurt more, that they were angry or that they didn't seem surprised, as if they'd always known this day would come and had just been waiting for me to finally fail them in the way they feared most, by choosing myself. Then came the public fallout. Darren took to Facebook. His post wasn't direct, but it didn't have to be. Something about family betrayal, those who turn their backs when they're needed most, people who care more about quartz countertops than kin. Within hours, Aunt Cheryl had chimed in. Some people forget who helped raise them. Uncle Ron shared an old photo of Darren and me as kids with the caption, "Blood should mean something." I didn't respond. Not online. Not in my group texts. Not even when my cousin Megan tagged me in a comment that said, "I'm so disappointed, Isabel." Let them talk. Let them spin the story. Because the truth, the one I now held in my hands like the title deed to this house, was simple. I wasn't the one who left the family. They left me. Every time they chose Darren over fairness, guilt over grace, obligation over love. The house, meanwhile, became more than just shelter. It became sanctuary. Each box I unpacked was a small declaration of freedom. Every shelf I filled was a boundary restored. I painted the sunroom a soft sage green and filled it with plants, books, and sketch pads. I ate dinner on the patio beneath string lights. I slept deeply, more deeply than I had in years. One morning, as I trimmed the ivy crawling along the fence, my neighbor stepped outside. She introduced herself as June Holloway, early 50s, divorced, herbalist, and proud owner of the lush garden next door. "Your place is coming along beautifully," she said, handing me a potted basil without preamble. A house always breathes easier when it belongs to the right person. We started having coffee together on Saturdays, swapping stories, laughing, sitting in quiet. She never asked why I lived alone. She never needed to. Taylor visited a few weekends later, hauling in a monstera plant and a bottle of wine. "I've never seen you this calm," she said as we sat on the patio. "Is that good or boring?" "It's powerful," she said, "and honestly overdue." It wasn't all serenity. I still had moments where I missed them. Not their behavior, but the idea of them. The version of my parents I used to imagine existed. Before the money, before Darren's failures became my debts, before family meant obligation without end. But grief, I was learning, isn't always a sign of regret. Sometimes it's just proof that you're healing. And in the quiet of my new home, I was finally beginning to heal. It started with a text. Unknown number. Just one line. "Hey, it's Rachel. Got a new phone. I just wanted to say, I understand, and I'm sorry." Attached was a photo. The twins and baby Lila, sitting on a picnic blanket in what looked like a modest rental backyard. All three were smiling. No tension in their bodies. No guilt in their eyes. Just kids being kids. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because something inside me loosened just a little. I typed slowly. "Thanks for reaching out. I miss them too. How are you all doing?" She responded almost instantly. "Managing. Darren found part-time work. We're in a rental now. Small, but ours. My parents helped with the deposit." There was a pause, then another message. "Your parents have been telling people you abandoned them, that you left us all to struggle." I exhaled, not surprised, but still bruised. I'd grown up under Dad's control of the family narrative. Darren's failures were always misunderstandings. My silence was coldness. My success? A fluke. Or worse, a phase. Still, I appreciated Rachel's honesty. "Thanks for telling me," I replied. "You didn't have to." I wanted to. I never thought the plan was fair, but I didn't know how to speak up. Her message didn't undo the past, but it opened something. Later that week, I walked to the park near my house. No headphones, no distractions, just me and the wind threading through the trees. I watched a little girl climb a jungle gym, her dad waiting with open arms. And suddenly I thought of Lila, her tiny fingers grabbing my necklace the last time I held her. The way her eyes had always found mine, even in a crowd. They didn't ask for any of this. The kids. And Rachel, maybe she had neither. So when Thanksgiving rolled around and no invitation came from my parents, I didn't feel angry. Just resolved. I roasted a small chicken. Taylor came over with her famous cornbread. June brought wine and cranberry chutney. We laughed. We played cards. We lit candles and took our time. And then a message. "Missed you today," Rachel wrote. "The food wasn't as good without your cranberry relish." I didn't cry, but I did reread that message 3 times before replying. "Next year," I wrote, "maybe we do our own thing." "I'd like that," she said. That night, I lay in bed, the windows cracked open to let in the cold, clean air of Portland in late November. The city hummed outside, and somewhere out there, a fragile thread had been tied between 2 women who had both, in different ways, learned to stay quiet for too long. Now, maybe neither of us had to anymore. By spring, the house had truly become mine, not just legally, but spiritually, emotionally, room by room. I shaped it to reflect the woman I had spent years becoming beneath layers of duty and expectation. The sunroom became my studio, light filtering through sheer curtains onto drafting boards and design books. The kitchen held my grandmother's cast iron skillet and a tea kettle that whistled like punctuation to my mornings. And the garden. June and I had expanded it, building raised beds that bloomed with herbs, tomatoes, and a little lemon tree that clung to life like it had something to prove. Rachel and the kids visited in early summer. Darren didn't come. She brought lemon bars and folding chairs. The boys ran circles around the maple tree, and Lila climbed onto my lap with a paintbrush, asking to help with my garden labels. Rachel watched us quietly for a moment, then said, "They still talk about you every week. Aunt Isabel is a big deal." I smiled. They're easy to love. Later, after the kids had passed out in sleeping bags, we sat on the porch with tea. "I started my own business," she said. "Virtual assistant work, mostly for realtors. Flexible, remote. I never would have had the courage before." "What changed?" I asked. "You did," she said. "Watching you set boundaries reminded me I could too." Her words stayed with me long after they drove away. Sometimes when we stand our ground, we think we're building walls. But maybe we're actually clearing paths. For ourselves. For others. Mom came to visit in the fall. Just her. No dad. No Darren. She arrived with a nervous smile and a tin of molasses cookies like nothing had happened. But something had, and we both knew it. She toured the house slowly, touching the woodwork, pausing at the bookshelves I'd built by hand. "This suits you," she said. "All of it." We sat in the garden as golden leaves drifted around us. She looked at me, eyes softer than I remembered. "I was hard on you," she said. "Harder than I meant to be. I thought I was preparing you for life. But maybe I was just repeating what had been done to me." I didn't rush to forgive. I didn't rush to fix. I just let her speak. "I hope you'll come home for Christmas," she added. "I'll think about it," I said. And I meant it, because I had learned something powerful in the past year. Home isn't a place you're given. It's a place you claim. And family, real family, doesn't demand your life in exchange for belonging. They make room for your voice, even when it challenges theirs. That winter, I hosted my own Thanksgiving. 20 people gathered, colleagues, neighbors, Taylor, June, Rachel, and the kids. We lit candles. We passed dishes. We shared stories. No one raised their voice. No one asked me for anything but to pass the mashed potatoes. At the end of the night, I stood at the edge of my tiny living room, looking at the people who filled it, and felt something deep settle inside me. Peace. I had built this. Not just the home, but the life, the rules, the rhythm. I had chosen myself, and instead of ending alone, I ended surrounded. Have you ever made a decision that disappointed your family but saved your spirit? Tell me in the comments. Maybe your story is the one someone else needs to hear tonight. And if this resonated with you, like, share, and subscribe. You're not alone. You never were.